Hello and welcome back to Dr. Ray's English on my IELTS speaking course. Today is lesson 5. I'm using the resources of Lingua House to assist me in these lessons. Awesome resources. If you need to contact me or want some extra help, have a look at my Facebook right here where there are some free resources, etc. Today we're going to move on to the part 2 of the IELTS exam, which quite scares people. We're going to be using as our subject today cooking. In part 2 of the IELTS speaking exam, you will be given a card. You must talk for up to 2 minutes, between 1 and 2 minutes, preferably closer to 2 minutes, on the topic on the card. And the examiner will not speak to you during this time. This quite often scares people because the examiner is totally silent. Just gives you the card, gives you a piece of paper and a pencil and tells you you have 1 minute to prepare your talk. And then you must talk for up to 2 minutes. He will not interrupt you at all. You'll have 1 minute to prepare your talk. It's very important that you use that time to prepare your talk very effectively. This is where the secret to scoring well lies, in this preparation in part 2. Planning your talk and referring to your notes as you talk is the best way to score well. You are allowed to read your notes in this part. The question will actually ask several small questions, and you must address each one to get a good score. It's easy when you know how. And after this lesson, you will know how. Okay, let's have a look at a typical way to do this. Here is a question, a typical IELTS Part 2 speaking question. Describe a place you have lived in that you particularly liked. You should say when you lived there, who you lived with, what was most memorable about this place, and explain why you liked it so much. Okay, the way to handle this is to take the piece of paper and the pencil that you're given and make what we call a mind map. There are several things that you absolutely must talk about. And the examiner will be ticking off what he believes you must talk about. And if you cover them all, you will score well, even if your grammar, your pronunciation was not as good as you expect. So long as you cover everything, you will score quite well. So what are the things we need to talk about here? Number 1, we have to talk about the place. Where is it? What is this place? You need to talk about when you lived there. So that's number 2. Who you lived with. That's number 3 you must talk about. Number 4, what was memorable. And number 5, why you liked it. So there's 5 things that you absolutely must talk about. So if there's 5 things to talk about, there are 7 steps. First, you should try to restate the question so that the examiner knows you're aware of what you have to talk about. Then you talk about those 5 things, and then you finish your talk. You tell him that you're finished. You don't just say, I'm finished. That's all. No, you have to say it something like, now that's about that's my little story about the place I lived with that I really liked. Okay, so you've got pencil and paper, and then you have to start. First of all, you know you're going to introduce the topic by saying, I want to tell you about, I will talk about, let me tell you about, I've been asked to talk about such and such a thing. Okay, you know you're going to start off like that, so you don't have to put that on your mind map. Now on the piece of paper that you get, now you have to start making your mind map. The first thing you have to write on it is the place. Put it in the middle, right? The place. Then you have to make sure you talk about who you lived with. You have to talk about when you lived there. You have to talk about why it was memorable. Then you have to also talk about why you liked it there. Remember, the examiner does not look at this mind map. But if he sees you making the mind map, he knows you're well organized, and he'll pay attention very well. Now, if you just talked about those things, you wouldn't last for 2 minutes. So you have to think about things to say about these things. You might add things like the place or what country it's in. hmm And also its location. Whereabouts in the country is it? When? Now here you don't have to give any specific dates, but you might talk about in my childhood, before I was married, before I met my current boyfriend, girlfriend, something like that. And, maybe some little extra thing about that. Remember, you have to talk for 2 minutes. And who lived there with you? Okay. You might say your parents. Let's say something more about parents. They're retired now. And maybe you lived there with your brother, so put that in your mind map. Maybe say something about him. Maybe his job. Anything you like about him, okay? Why was it memorable? Oh, let's say, it was a tall house and it had a very long staircase. Why do you remember that? Because you were afraid you'd fall down the staircase. These are all just little human touches that make your speech very interesting. Also, outside in the garden there was a swing. I remember this swing because my father made it. Let's see, what else? Why I liked it? Well, it was full of very happy memories. It was because I played there a lot with my friends. All right, so we've covered the things that are absolutely necessary, and now to sum up, we have to say that's my little story about a place I really liked living in. Okay, now when we start off with this part here I want to tell you about, we have to restate the question, but we have to try to do it in a slightly different way to how it's written. Okay, so let's give an example. Here is my mind map. How will I talk about this? And the examiner will say, okay, you can begin speaking now. Remember, he's got a clock and he's watching for 2 minutes. So when you start doing these and practicing these, it's a very good idea to practice with a clock. Get used to the idea of talking for almost 2 minutes. And so the examiner says, okay, you can begin speaking now. Oh, okay. Well, I have been asked to tell you about somewhere that I lived that I particularly liked. This place was a little town in the countryside called Laidley. It's in Australia. The location is about 40 kilometres west of Brisbane, which is the capital of Queensland. I lived there during my childhood, and I went to school there with some of my friends at primary school. It was very interesting. I lived in this house with my parents. Both of my parents are now retired. My father was an electrician and my mother was a policeman. I also lived there with my brother, who is now an engineer and got a very successful business. He's moved to China. The place was very memorable for me because as a child I can remember had a very long staircase coming from the top story down to the bottom story. We were 4 stories high. I remember this staircase very well because I was often afraid that I might fall down. I also remember this place because outside in the garden was a swing which my father had made from an old car tyre and a long rope and attached it to a tall tree. My friends and I used to play on this swing. We had a lot of fun in that garden, especially in the spring and the summertime. I really liked living in this place because even now, when I think about it, it brings back to me very happy memories of my childhood and when I played with my friends as a little boy. That's my little story about somewhere that I really like to live, and I really hope you enjoyed listening to it, and thank you for listening to it. Under 2 minutes, but certainly over 1. That's the perfect place. That's the timing that's important. You've got to get used to it. Alright, so it's important to make a mind map and follow the mind map when you actually speak. Okay, so let's have a look at one example here. We would say we're going to be talking about cooking today. Here is a fairly typical one. Talk about a dish you know how to cook. You should describe what the ingredients are, how it is cooked, other preparation you have to do, and say if you think this is an easy dish to cook or not, and why. Let's have a look. We'll think now about making our mind map if this was the case. You can stop the video right now and see how you would do. Make a mind map about this and see how many things you feel you have to talk about. Once you've done that, you can start the video again. Okay, let's see how somebody did this. Here is the question here, and here is what this person said about this. I'm going to describe a dish I cook all the time. It's called chicken jalfrezi. It's made of chicken, chopped tomatoes, onion, garlic, green chili, and some Indian herbs and spices. To make this dish, first I chop the onions, garlic, and green chili. Next, I fry them in a pan with the Indian spices. Then I add the chopped tomatoes and simmer everything for about 20 minutes. Finally, I add cooked chicken and chopped coriander leaves and simmer for another 10 minutes. When the dish is ready, I usually serve it with basmati rice or naan bread. I think this dish is very easy to make, but if you want to make it the traditional way, it takes more time and it's a bit more complicated. Personally, I don't have much time for cooking, so I make it the quick way. Okay, let's have a look at her answer. First of all, as we said earlier, did she introduce the topic? Ah, she did. I'm going to describe a dish I cook all the time. It's called chicken jalfrezi. Did she talk about what the ingredients are? Yes, it's made of chicken, chopped tomatoes, onion, garlic, green chili, and some Indian herbs and spices. Did she say how it is cooked? Yes. She said, to make this dish, first I chop the onions, etc., etc. Other preparation you have to do. Finally, I add cooked chicken and chopped coriander leaves and simmer for another 10 minutes. Yes. And I serve it on basmati rice. And say if you think this is an easy dish to cook, and why not? Okay, I think this is easy to make. So, and she really did. She did everything that she was supposed to. She will score very high. She will score 7 or above for this. Okay, how about you? Now you go through this exercise. Here is your question. Don't forget to make a mind map. Then practice talking. Time yourself between 1 and 2 minutes. Not over 2 minutes, but not under 1. Describe a typical dish from your country. You should describe what it looks like, what it tastes like, when people usually eat it, and say if you would recommend this dish to a visitor. Okay, over to you. Stop the video, make your mind map, practice your talk. Okay, so did you do these things? Did you restate the question? Did you say what the dish is? Did you say what it looks like? Did you say what it tastes like? Did you say when people usually eat it? Did you say if you recommend it? And did you close the presentation by saying, "Thank you for listening to my story"? If you mentioned all these things, you should score well. This is a quite typical Part 2 question. I suggest you look around for cooking vocabulary and add it to your notebook. Remember, when adding new vocabulary to your notebook, look for the verb, look for the noun, look for an adjective, and look for an adverb. There won't be all of those things in some cases, so you have to be selective. That's all for this lesson. Our next lesson will continue on Part 2 speaking, and it will be about describing people, one of the most common topics asked in this section. Well done.